Okay, I think I'm recording now. Okay, yes, I'm recording. And so let's do a little bit of silence. Okay. Hello. Welcome to another episode of podcast. And if you're watching this on a Sunday night or a Monday morning or afternoon, we're doing a special episode on affirmative action with our guest Allison Chao, a UCLA class of 2021 student studying um, bachelor's in arts, I believe, bachelor's of arts and communication studies, and double major in labor studies. And you're working on the Yes on 16 campaign.
Yeah, I'm not a student fellow, but I've just volunteered with different student boards and with like the Bruins for Prop 16 coalition.
Yeah,
Also, just a quick correction, sorry, labor studies minor.
labor studies minor. Oh, so I thought it was a double major. um, so you're a current student, and you've been working on the Yes on 16 campaign. And do you want to just introduce the idea of Yes on 16? For me personally, I've been seeing a lot of No on 16 conversations. The idea that it's a racist uh, proposition, enacting racial quotas, and all of these things. Do you want to clear up on the yes side of Proposition 16?
Yeah,
Just to start
definitely.
off. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are definitely a lot of myths around Prop 16 and affirmative action. Um, but essentially, Prop 16 would be ending the ban of affirmative action that was implemented in the 1990s with Prop 209,
Hmm.
essentially so that we can really level the playing field and offer equal opportunity for underrepresented minority groups within like public universities and public jobs.
Hmm.
Um, as you mentioned, there's like a lot of myths around Prop 16, including like instilling racial quotas, which is just not true. Racial quotas are illegal. I think that was established in like the 70s. I think it was the UC Regents versus Bakke case by the Supreme Court. So um, definitely Prop 16 is not about um, creating racial quotas in public educate or public universities. It's all about just creating a race conscious system that really acknowledges the gender and racial discrimination that already exists
Hmm.
in like our state.
So in terms of the language of the proposition, so since 209 happened in 98, I believe. I forgot.
Yeah, it's like 96 or 98, something like
96
that.
or
Yeah,
98. Around that
in the
time,
90s.
we've had we had the absence of affirmative action in California, and the idea is to currently right now is to put it back in the books to gain more, more people of color into a chance of getting into college. And then something that I think the LA Times produced recently is that there was somebody that's was trying to focus in on the conversation that it wasn't just a admissions question. It was more of putting more funding into getting more people of color to finish the A through G requirements, to get them into AP classes, and to get them to test better in those AP courses. So, um, what do you think is this idea that it's been so hyper focused on this idea of college admissions, and especially in the Asian American community? That might be a loaded
Yeah.
question.
Oh no, you're good. I'll try to talk as best as I can. Um, uh, definitely like public universities and um, university admissions dominates the conversation around Prop 16 a lot. But as you mentioned, like Prop 16 is what is about so much more than just admission rates. Um, you mentioned like earlier before we started recording, you mentioned equal opportunity programs at the CSU system and different outreach programs, specifically at like high schools with larger representation of people of color. So Prop 16 is not just about like it's not just about taking race into consideration in admissions. It's about um, implementing actual or using actual tools and implementing actual programs that
Hmm.
are working to um, increase not only just the knowledge and um, yeah, the knowledge about or applying to colleges and like access to higher education, but also
Hmm.
to like really encourage students to see themselves in these places of privilege that they might not have seen themselves before.
Yeah, exactly. And it's more the idea of kind of leveling the playing field, and especially on the high school level, on the conversation of, you know, and I've worked with high school students before and currently do, is that there is a lot of high school students that feel where they're a community of color that feel like the chances of getting into college are lesser than, say, white or Asian American, you know. And then within that demographic, and we mentioned before in our pre-interview, it's like even talking amongst the Asian American community itself, is that, you know, this idea that all Asian Americans are getting into college, like we should not necessarily think that's the case, because, you know, if you think of the numbers of income and the chances of the breaking down the statistic of all Asian Americans, Southeast Asian communities tend to not graduate high school or tend to not get into colleges of their choice. So affirmative action, you know, would help those communities try to get into college. And then for me, for full disclosure, our conversation about the CSULA and the EOP program is that, you know, whenever I do talk about affirmative action, I need to tell people, it's like, listen, affirmative action got me into college. Affirmative action helps me in the process of getting in there, and I wouldn't necessarily be in a 4 year college if it weren't for that program to say, it's like, you know, you just need just a little bit to get you across the edge. And then, and as a person that doesn't identify as East Asian, it's like it was a very empowering um conversation. And I have to tell people, it's like, you know, I might have bias if I'm going to talk about affirmative action, because this is my experience, and I feel like this would be a good thing for Asian Americans that are left in the margins, especially the Southeast Asian community. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
if that was a question, it was more of a statement.
Oh yeah, no. Um, I can respond to the statement, or I don't have to. But yeah, I also think very deeply rooted in that it goes beyond just Prop 16.
Mhm.
Um, I often think of just like how East Asian, the disparities between like East Asian versus Southeast Asians, um, in uh, universities, um, and sorry, what was that? My thought. Oh, I often think of like the model minority myth, and just how often we are seen as this group that just thrives and succeeds on our own when that is not the case, and how harmful that mindset is, because it really just negates all these experiences of discrimination and barriers to um, like public uh, universities and jobs that are absolutely experienced by Asian Americans, but like we just don't acknowledge that because we have this idea that Asian Americans, we are meant to be successful, like we are overachievers, like it's just so harmful um, to our community.
So what we're currently facing right now in 2020, and then in this current election, that there's been a lot of talk and a lot of promotion on this idea of no on 16. And I think LA LA Times recently produced like a 6 minute deep dive on it, and they're saying that many of these individuals calling for a no on 16 tends to be more East Asian, newer immigrants from China, according to LA Times, and then done through social media such as WeChat. Have you seen that within your circles, that you know, within, say, family or friend groups, that, you know, have you seen a lot of no on 16? And like, how are the commercials, how is the messaging on no on 16, that you've probably seen so far?
Yeah, I've definitely encountered a lot of opposition to Prop 16, um, whether it's on social media, on Facebook. I've seen a lot, not just me, but I've talked with other like Asian American students at UCLA, and we've just talked about seeing all these ads on Facebook. We often talk about like how the No on 16 or campaign, I guess, and groups that support it really like twist words that have like a lot of historical meaning, and um, it's just it's very it's under I can understand why people are confused if they are not fully educated on what affirmative action is, like why they
Mm-hmm.
feel like affirmative action is racist, um, when like I think one group on Facebook that I see really often is California for Equal Rights, and I think
Mm-hmm.
they've been doing a lot of No on 16 ads, and like when you see a organization called California for Equal Rights saying a policy is racist, you're most likely going to believe that policy is racist if you don't do further research or if you don't encounter any other information on that. Also, definitely like on like even a personal level, like my parents are also very conservative. I'm from Illinois, full disclaimer,
Mm-hmm.
um, California voter, but that's where I'm from. And we, especially in August before I was in California, I remember we had like a community event on hosted by Apollo, which is the Asian Pacific American Labor Alliance, and it was just supposed to be a very casual conversation slash panel, just talking about all these myths about affirmative action. And I remember trying to convince my mom to sit through it, but um, she not really being too open, and afterwards trying to talk to her about it. And I heard a lot of the myths that I had just um, had a conversation about, how like racial quotas would be instilled, how race should not be a defining factor. And, these are just all myths about Prop 16, and I'm trying to explain that this is actually incorrect, but it's so hard when there's like a lot of false news in the media, and especially I don't know if we already touched on this, but just how Asian Americans are really used as this wedge group
Mm-hmm.
to really divide communities of color and to really place us in some kind of hierarchy, as if we are not, as if we don't face discrimination or barriers. Um, but yeah, having those conversations can be difficult. But I try my best to really paint the full picture, explain really the history of affirmative action and really Asian American history too, just because my parents are immigrants. So they're also not aware of a lot of the history against Asian Americans in the
Yeah,
US.
and like the history of Asian American advocacy.
Mm-hmm.
Quick sidebar. That's a complete vibe. I do have individuals in my family that are quite conservative, but I think over time it's like, I think part of the reason I don't think that they're changing their minds. I don't set up this podcast as a way to change my parents' mind or anything, but it was a way to just kind of like, talk about to other professionals or to other individuals that have an ear to the community and can be like somehow a counter towards all the conservative media that are set forth on the mainstream and certain things like that. And another quick tangent, in terms of immigration and Asian American identity, I've had this long conversation with a friend that is a he's like a he's an Asian American, but like from Guangzhou, China, and like certain things like that. And I had a conversation about how once you're an American, you kind of inherit all the history of America, especially like the history of Chinese exclusion, the history of Japanese internment, and the call for Just Vincent Chin, back in the 80s. So it's like we inherit that history, but like we don't often teach that in school. So a lot of our parents don't necessarily know that history, that there are some things that we messed up, but we're always trying to move forward as a community, and what's best for not just the Asian American community, but for like our inherited country, which is the United States. So I think that's a very idealistic version of how I see things, but I try my best in those terms. But to reiterate something that you mentioned, the idea of affirmative action has kind of been omnipresent uh, um, since the Harvard versus the Student for Fair Admissions. And we did talk about it at the very beginning, but I just wanted to say this quote from the organization, that the Students for Fair Admissions, says that an Asian American applicant with 25 has a chance to get into a college at 25%, or the so basically the other ethnicities. Oh, my notes are bad.
No, you're
Sorry.
so good.
Yeah, so but in terms, they're just making the argument that other groups, if affirmative action doesn't pass, that the idea that Asian Americans will not necessarily be um put into the colleges of their choice, like Harvard, Stanford, and all of these things. And in October 2019, the decision was made that the Harvard admissions process did not discriminate against Asian Americans. But now there's been kind of more of a movement. Certain states already has gotten rid of affirmative actions since that date. Do you since this decision was made in October 2019, do you feel confident of the future of affirmative actions? What are some of your concerns for the Asian American community and other communities of color if affirmative action gets to the Supreme Court and then vote and get basically destroyed in the future? Do you worry about that?
Personally, yes, I worry, but I worry about a lot of things.
That's true.
Um, uh, um, Hypothetically, I guess if affirmative action was just banned um, throughout the whole country, we would see, because we saw the effects of what banning affirmative action did in California. Um, I know that I think Asian American admission rates have declined across almost all the UC campuses. I think besides UC Riverside or something, or one of the campuses hasn't, but almost across all the campuses, like Asian American admission rates declined after banning
Hmm.
affirmative action, which is something that, like, for some reason, people do not like to talk about
Hmm.
um, on the opposing side. And so, like that, and not just that, but like decrease of like retention and or recruitment and retention programs. Um, like we talked about, like there's the equal opportunity programs at CSUs, and at UCLA we have like a lot of other programs. There's C Clear, which is uh, Southeast Asian. Uh, shoot, I Southeast Asian Campus Learning and Education. That's what it is. And that's like another outreach retention program specifically aimed for Southeast Asian students at UCLA. But what was it? Oh, and so by banning affirmative action, you're threatening all these different programs that have, or at, okay, rewind to 1990s. Prop 209 is threatening all these um, uh, retention and recruitment programs that have working successfully. Prop 209 passes. You see the admission rates drop for students of color. I feel like recently, earlier this summer, there was like it was like big news that like UC's like admitted or enrolled like the highest number of Latino students they had like
Hmm.
ever or something like that. I can't remember exactly what they were so proud of, um, but like that totally negates the fact that already they are such Latino students are such a small percentage, and already so underrepresented. It's kind of funny to be so pride be so proud to admit like the highest number when in the grand scheme of things it's still very low,
Mm-hmm.
compared to other uh, students of other non-students of color, sorry. um, and so like banning affirmative action would, like, we know the effects of banning it decreases representation of students of color. um, so yes, I worry in the sense that if, yeah, especially with like recent like Supreme Court, what's it called, appointment, now that we have like this full, almost full conservative Supreme Court. Yeah, a lot of anxiety, I think, with general politics.
Mm-hmm.
um but I think it's also important to like recognize that, like, Prop 209 was um passed in, yeah, the 1990s, and people have been fighting it since
Mm-hmm.
then. um Especially like the labor organizers that I've worked with, like at Apala. um a lot of them, or maybe not a lot, but several of them were UC students at the time of Prop 209 and protested against it. And they are now working professionals, and they're still working against it.
Mm-hmm.
Affirmative action, and like, there's just such a history of fighting for it, and organizers have been working like this is a decades long fight. I see these organizers, and they're tired, and but they will keep going. Like, we
Mm-hmm.
will, regardless of what, um, this election in what, 3 days, regardless of what the outcome is. I am confident that, um, Asian Americans, and really just everyone who is, for progressive change, um, will continue to fight for it and ensure that at some point it will be, implemented everywhere.
Yeah. Um. So let's just.
Hopefully that wasn't too confusing. Sorry, I think I went on a tangent.
Oh, don't worry. I think I've also confused myself with my chicken scratch of notes too. So don't worry about it. But those who are saying put no on 16, and some of these arguments kind of date back towards the Harvard, that case for Harvard and the students for admissions to that. um, they want to have only test scores be the biggest indicator, and then the GPA to be the biggest indicator for college admissions. But I think both you and I know, both me working with students and then you being a current student in UCLA, that test scores aren't the end all be all about getting yourself into college, and that there's more to it than just that. And one of the interesting things that I got from I believe was CBS is that the idea of using just test scores as an indication of, and GPS as an indication of how good a student can be, it only shows that the student has previous parent education, or the test scores, like they had more funding to get those students into tutoring programs, and it's not necessarily kind of like a level playing field. So if you have a situation, say for example me, Southeast Asian students, that if I didn't have the support I did, like the supportive teachers in the Alhambra school district, and and the situation where we had like many programs from UCLA coming down to help me out to get to at least get to Cal State LA. UCLA was kind of my first choice, as many Asian Americans would be, but for them to come down and help me out as much as they did, like it did help me along that path. So do you agree that using test scores is the best indication of success, especially in the Asian American community?
I think you hinted at it while you were asking the question, but I'm also in the mindset that definitely test scores, even GPA, are absolutely not representative of, like, student success.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think like our, and I think like admissions have kind of tried to work around that, like with like holistic review, things to, and they try to like consider all these different aspects of like an applicant's life, like extracurriculars, if they're working, things like that. Um, but again, I just don't think it's enough, and that's why we need affirmative action, because race, for so many people of color, like race is such a defining point of their experiences, or
Mhm.
not defining, but like their experiences are so in, their experiences are, oh, what's the word where, innate, I, no, I'm sorry, language,
S-
big words I'm not good with, but their
you could say
experience is
maybe
so,
entrenched with their
yes,
identity.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, um and their cultural, yeah, like with their cultural identities, like it's impossible to implement like this colorblind system when like
Hmm.
so many of our experiences are already impacted by our race. um and so that's just tying in the, test scores are not representative at all of how successful we are, or how successful we will be. You also mentioned, um yeah, like especially with just like how expensive tutoring can be.
Hmm.
um like even in high school, I remember so many, like seeing, getting so many emails about like signing up for tutoring, get a private tutor, only a couple $1,000s for like two, like a couple weeks, like as if that's like easy money that any student has access to.
Yeah.
um yeah.
Yeah, I feel like we also brought up the cases like it's also this economics conversation that I mean, we mentioned it before. It's providing more funding, at least in the high school systems, to help people get the H3Gs and then pass AP tests and have training programs and have tutoring programs in the schools. And I think that upon the whole racialized language of the no on 16 is currently right now, I don't think they necessarily grasp the idea that it's also an economic thing. It's more funding into schools, it's more funding into programs, and it's more on those ends. And I think, I don't know if Yes on 16 really captured that, the idea that it will be more funding for schools in the public system, more in areas where historically has been neglected by public funds. There's parts of LA where, it's not, even though it's LA unified, each part of the district across the LA
Hmm.
USD has certain different types of funding, and it's always pertaining towards sales tax or property taxes in those areas. So it's filling in those gaps where schools that historically did not have programs to get students in there into college, it's for them to get more programs. Do you feel like that there's kind of a missed opportunity to kind of message that messaging on the yes, and then do you think it's just kind of like a pandering towards this idea of using civil rights language in the no on 16?
um i I feel like the Yes on 16, or I can't speak about like the actual campaign like from their
Right, right, right.
point. But I feel like in general, opponents of 16 actually have like talked about, um, why don't we consider socioeconomic status instead of race? Um, and like I guess our response is that is in place right now. Like income level is already considered. Um, and it's obviously not working. Like as I mentioned, like the rates, the admission rates of students of color are still decreasing.
Hmm.
um, I think it's important to just like address, like I guess the reason, or I again I can't speak on like the reasoning, but um, the way I see it is just like race and socioeconomic status are just so entrenched with each other.
Hmm.
I like that word. Um, that to like try to put them into separate categories doesn't, it's only addressing one part of the problem. It's not addressing, the systemic oppression that's part of all of that. um, so I don't know if maybe that could have been used more in the language to really emphasize how affirmative action will
Mhm.
um, promote equal opportunity, especially for low income students. But um, definitely like Prop 16 and affirmative action will. Um, I guess just the language has been definitely more about like the racial aspect of it,
Mhm.
just because it's about implementing the race conscious system again.
Okay, so kind of to do a little speed round, just to kind of wrap up a little bit about Prop 16. So here's some kind of, I would say, facts that I've kind of written down from reading up and like watching certain things about Proposition 19, and kind of like the campaign that says no. So the idea that racial quotas will be in place for colleges, um, that's not a thing, right? Like it's already been decided in 1978 that racial quotas are unconstitutional, and let's get that straight away. Like having a yes on 16 doesn't mean that there's racial quotas coming back, and I think already colleges wouldn't want racial quotas even if 16 is passed. I didn't think UCI or UC Berkeley already said that we're not putting in racial quotas. We're just trying to get more people of color to colleges. Um, the idea that there would be more Asian Americans into if we get rid of affirmative action, that more Asian Americans will be in college. Yes and no. I don't know. Many people during that Harvard um, um, versus students for fair admissions say that there would be more Asian Americans accepted into college, but we did already talked about it. We haven't had affirmative action since 1990s, since the 1990s. So that argument that it would increase more Asian American participation into colleges, I think that's a little bit debunked too. And one of the things that I found interesting, especially in that conversation of that lawsuit between Harvard, is that you know it's kind of going back and using that model minority myth as a way to give this perceived idea of like there's progress in colleges and in these areas, and it's really being used as kind of like a weapon for against non-white groups, especially as we mentioned before, the Latin American community and the African American community, yeah, and communities probably in between all of that. So it's this idea of the model minority myth is, so it's kind of, this is the new chapter of it. So is there anything else I missed? I don't think so. Just to quick get some numbers. According to LA Times, as of last week, it says with their polling, it says 31% says yes at this current moment, 47 says no. I guess the messaging on the idea it's a race issue is kind of working for the no on 16 at the moment. The funding for the yes on 16 is 17 million versus 1 million on the no. So that kind of blows my mind a little bit. And people that are undecided is only at 22%. So I'm really hoping right now, I think if anything, um, a no will just basically say the proposition that of 209 just still stands, um, and it'll just be more tougher for say communities like that are disadvantaged to get people in college. Um, yeah, do you have anything else to add? Sorry, I think I had like this long run on thing going here. Sorry about that.
No, oh my goodness, I think you wrapped it up so well. Um, yeah, like just going back to like the polling numbers, I definitely read somewhere that like um, support for 16 has not gone past like 40% or something like that. In like our most like liberal areas, it's still trailing behind in the polls. But I feel like just like in for whenever we're advocating for like progressive change, um, for for positive impact of our communities, like it's just like we have to keep like optimism.
Mm-hmm.
um like ACA 5 Prop 16, that's like a, like I mentioned, like that's a decades in the making, like even before, yeah, like decades in the making. um and like the students who fought against Prop 209 are now the adults teaching students to fight against or fight for Prop 16. Like um and like I I don't know if I mentioned this, but like um especially like with my work in Apollo, like we are really trying to address like how important like intergenerational um or yeah intergenerational or how necessary, how do I phrase this best? How we need like these intergenerational connections and
Hmm.
teaching and sharing of experiences. Sorry, my screen is so dark. Um,
Oh, it's okay.
uh, to really just continue fighting on, um, yeah, like regardless of what the outcome is in a couple of days. I think the fight for affirmative action, for equal opportunity for students of color, for
Hmm.
the advancements of Asian American rights, like that fight will not end, and will organizers will still be working. Will still be, yeah. I'm prepared for whatever. I'm trying to be prepared for whatever comes in a
Yeah.
couple days.
Yeah, and yeah, it's there's still a lot of Asian American groups that are fighting for progressive things like these, and um what you were talking about, like that intergenerational, kind of disconnect between, what the younger population is feeling about, individuals like Trump versus what adults are feeling. And those things come with their own historical baggage. And I don't know if you want to talk about this a little bit more, maybe extend the podcast maybe by 10 to 15 minutes, but it is true. It's like, for me, and like because I work so closely with students and students of colors, like my politics tend to be more of like, I support more students and schools to do more to get them into college and all of those things. But I do have family that they are very much afraid. They have this idea that when they immigrated here was a Republican president, and because that was the case, they have this idea that it's a life debt. And I totally understand that's what they believe, and that's what they want to vote on. But I often tell individuals that are of that generations, the conservative party that was back in the day, like the 70s and 80s, are not the same party that it is now. And and I don't necessarily want to be a tool for other people to put other people down. And like this idea of Proposition 16, that it's a race issue, it's like ultimately the decisions for affirmative action is to empower as many people as we can, not to not just for a small group of Asian Americans. And that's the messaging I've been kind of working on. And do you work a lot with talking to um addressing community issues in the Asian American community?
I think this is a new space that
Yeah.
I've only been in like a couple of months, and I think that's why I've wanted to volunteer as much time as I can, because like true, I grew up like in a mostly white suburb. Like I don't know, I just what I was never very connected with my Asian, especially like my Asian American identity. That was something like
Hmm.
I didn't understand. Like I really could not understand growing up.
Hmm.
And like that's not something I even was like even tried to confront until college and being in California and suddenly like finding all these progressive spaces with like these Asian American leaders and superheroes that like are just absolutely amazing. Like, yeah, these are definitely, it's all been a huge learning experience for me. But I have like so much admiration for, um, what was the question again? Yeah, I just have so much
Yeah, yeah. No, no.
admiration for
I
a
think it
lot of
was more of a
Asian
statement that that lead up to a question about did you see this in your community? It's like how how to talk about conservative ideas in the Asian American community. Um,
oh
but
um oh
oh,
sorry, didn't interrupt. Uh
uh,
I was
yeah,
also
that
gonna
was my
say
question.
just also like school. Really before this year, like I
So I am so sorry. I don't know what's happening. Hello. Hello. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. I give me a quick second. Technical difficulties. Real quick. Okay. Hello?
Can you hear me right now or
I can hear you.
hello?
Hello?
Oh, okay, perfect. Oh,
Sorry about that.
you can hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear
No,
you.
you're so good.
Alright. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened. I think my microphone went out for a second, and then
Oh
I tried to plug
no.
it back in, but my program was like, there
Oh,
was like,
still run. Okay.
yeah, there's a beach ball of death.
Oh,
Yeah. Um. Sorry about that. I didn't catch that last point. I'm so sorry.
oh no, you're so good. Did you hear any of it? I don't remember totally what I said. Um,
Well, we were on the discussion about talking about Asian American conservatism, the generational divide
yeah,
between young
and
individuals,
working. Yes.
yeah, and then um, yeah, we were just talking about Asian identity in terms of politics.
Mm-hmm. I think you had also mentioned like had I done much work with working with Asian American communities, and I would just wanted to like extra highlight some of the organizations like on my campus and I'm sure on other campuses,
Hmm.
um, like our Prop 16, the students that have been leading that. There's like this whole history of the mother orgs, which actually um, include like a lot of different AAPI, PETA orgs, including like the Asian Pacific Coalition, Vietnamese Student Union, Samaham Filipino, and like this mother org coalition um, was actually created in response to Prop 209's passing. And so these mother orgs, they they have been the ones that have been leading. I mean, it's like led by the mother orgs and like our external vice president office, like our undergraduate student associated council, student government.
Hmm.
But it's really been led by like the mother orgs and the EVP's office. And I just think that just speaks true.
Hello.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Hello. I don't know what's
Yeah.
happening. I'm so sorry.
No, you're
well,
fine.
I'm pretty sure once I export, the audio will still be with us. I'm
Oh,
I'm
okay.
I'm
Yeah,
fairly
no
sure about
worries.
that. But thank you for those shout outs. And also, by the way, shout out to Project Hope and the VSU for helping me out back in high school. Yeah, it really helped out. It's like I think it's one of the programs that really helped in getting me into college, and you know kind of helped me get over the hump of like being bummed out that I didn't get to UCLA. But they're all very supportive out there, and I'm pretty sure all the staff has changed at this point. Special shout out to all the organizations out of college that's been kind of like working on getting the word out about yes on 16. I'm sure AAAJ, even though my history with AAAJ is kind of not that great, but I'm pretty sure that they're really helping out with the Proposition 16. I'm sure a lot of Democratic led clubs and community members are really having conversations about this proposition. So I really hope, even though we may not get it this time, that hopefully maybe there'll be another movement down the line, or something to address affirmative action. I'm really hopeful, and I'm sure um one of the candidates for Alhambra, the city of Alhambra, is like we got to be moving forward, not backwards. So
Mm-hmm.
hopefully, we'll repeal 209. But if it's not this year, maybe there might be another movement. So
Mm-hmm.
let's be positive in this conversation. So thank you for listening. If you've liked our podcast, please consider subscribing and checking out Proposition 16 and different propositions, and please vote by tomorrow. I'm gonna
Yeah,
release this on
thank
Monday, so please vote. So we'll see you every later, and then and thank you for watching.